Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Employee Journey Mapping webinar. We're going to give everyone just a minute to get situated, grab that coffee. Please put in the chat your name, your position, and where you're located so we all can say hi to you. I'm Brittany Barhite. So welcome. Love to hear where you're from in the chat and where you're located at. Hopefully somewhere nice and warm and sunny today. It's windy here in Ohio. Hello, Leah. I see a note, will this be recorded? It absolutely will be recorded, so welcome, welcome. We'll get the recording out to you right after. Patrick from Chicago, I'm just a day after you in Ohio, also not warm, so yep. Welcome, hello Shelly. Hi Chuck, hi Andrea. Macy, oh, the names are flying in, welcome, welcome. For those of you just joining, we're gonna start in about 1 minute. And we're just welcoming everybody and putting your names and location in the chat. Love to hear what you do and where you're at. We have some sunny Floridas in there making me jealous. Welcome. All right. Hello, Teresa. Kansas City. We were all from across the U.S. so far. Have we seen any global ones? Anyone from across the pond? Orlando, Arizona, Texas, hello. Welcome, Sonia, hello. Ooh, a play experience manager, hello, Kira, hello, Lindsay. All right, I think we have a lot of people here, so I want to go ahead and get started because we have a very full agenda. My name is Brittany Barhite, excited to be with you all today. I'm the head of employee experience at Firstup, along with our esteemed panelists who are experts in employee journey mapping. They're going to share all their knowledge with you over the next hour. But before we dive into the webinar, I want to first thank you, our audience. We have over 600 people signed up for this webinar, and that means there's a huge interest in learning about employee journeys and how it can elevate the employee experience. Plus, we had over 400 questions. And so while we won't have time to do all 400, we categorize them into themes. And yes, we used ChatGPT and came up with your top burning questions to go through today. So hopefully we get them all covered. We will leave a few minutes for Q&A at the end. We also have, we're not doing slides because we want to do panel discussion and hear from everybody. But right after, you'll get the recording. You'll be sent a 5-step guide for employee journey mapping. You will also receive our Firstup Journey Planner to help chart your communication cadences and a recap of the top questions from this so you can hear what the expert said live. So very excited to dive in. So before we do the questions, let's start with introductions. I want to pass it over. Let's start with Michelle. Hello, Michelle.
Hi. Thank you all for having me today. I'm Michelle DiTondo with Avion Consulting. Prior to joining Avion, I was the Chief Human Resources Officer for MGM Resorts, where we implemented Firstup to be able to communicate to our 66,000 domestic employees. So excited to share that experience and what we learned with you today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to Ryan.
Good morning, I guess good afternoon. I saw a few folks from UK joining, so I guess it'd be good evening, maybe good afternoon, good evening to those folks. Ryan Malkes from Mercer. I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul today. It is cold. It got cold again, but sunny, so no complaints there. I actually lead up generative AI services at Mercer, but prior to that, I actually came from an organization called LeapGen. We were acquired by Mercer, where I led our employee experience design practice. So creating really meaningful experiences for our people. Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. We're cold here too in Ohio. And then Sejal, please introduce yourself to the group.
Thank you. Great to connect with you all today. I have a background in strategy consulting, marketing, and HR. For the previous 15 plus years, gosh, I've been a people leader and in companies in fintech, ClimateTech, as well as SaaS tech. I think we're all here because companies, it's all about the employee experience, and really excited to dive deeper into approaches and understand the journey mapping process from each of you.
Absolutely. We're all going to learn from each other. So thank you, panelists. Thank you for taking time to share your expertise. I'm Brittany Barhite, Head of Employee Experience at Firstup. Oversee communications here, as well as other onboarding recognition employee experiences. prior to working at Firstup, I also worked, I was a customer. I worked for a Fortune 500 company where we used the platform to connect with our deskless workers. So very passionate about elevating the employee experience and connecting people to the information they need. So let's get started on all those questions you sent in. There are a lot of studies out there talking about the importance of employee experience, and employee journey mapping is one way to help elevate the employee experience. But I want to hear from our experts. And one question that came in is, why does EX even matter? Why are we here today talking? So I'd like to hear from each of you, since you all have your own point of view. Let's start with Ryan. Why does EX even matter?
Big question, big topic. Before I answer, there might be a little delay, but I would love for people to throw in the chat, why does employee experience matter to you? We always have a story. And so as you're typing that in, I'm just personally curious. To me, employee experience matters. There's two things to think about. A, there's the philosophical reason, right? Employees are people. People support our business. They're really what makes all of this work. And employee experience is how an organization shows and displays love, care, and compassion to people. So philosophically, it's the right thing to do. Now, depending on the leader you talk to, that might not always be the best answer or the only answer. Tactically, and I think a few of my colleagues here will talk about this, employee experience is directly related to customer experience. The experiences that we provide to our employees, it influences their perceptions. And so if they perceive the business as caring for them, they go the extra mile. They provide that level of customer service that reflects how they feel the organization treats them. But at the end of the day, employee experience matters because employees are humans, and humans deserve care, love, and compassion. But Brittany, I'll toss it over to you, and I think our other panelists have some good answers too.
Absolutely. I love it so far. And let's see, did anybody, I was looking to see at the chat too. Definitely person's experience matters in organization. So in line what you're saying, better experience equals better engagement. Thank you all for sharing why you're here today. Michelle, what are your thoughts on why EX matters?
I think it's kind of like asking, why does customer experience matter? I think it's equally as important. I think all businesses understand, we have to plan and measure our customer experience. And I think foundational to that is the employee experience, because as Ryan said, the employee experience and how they're made to feel in the organization from that first moment where they're contacted in the recruitment process throughout their whole journey, all of those touch points create a perception of the organization and how the organization feels to them and about them. And in hospitality, we use the term discretionary effort, which is what Ryan was describing, that think about times when you've gone above and beyond, where you were performing your best. It's likely times where you felt like you were valued. So creating that employee journey or that employee experience that drives feelings of value leads to higher performance. As a human resource professional, I think we want to be at the table and we want to be strategic. And I think that makes the employee experience makes this a business initiative and not just an HR initiative. Because if the employees feel like they're valued, they'll perform at higher levels, which leads to better business results.
Absolutely. And do you want to add anything to that, Sejal?
Yeah, agree with all the chat comments and our other panelists. Customer experience, employee experience is at the atomic level of any program design. And it's at the atomic level because it reaches the heart. It creates a feeling that I matter. And so listening to our employees, understanding the needs and experience is really critical to the starting point of any program design or any communication. So in some ways, HR program design or even a product design, it starts with the problem statement and very quickly moves into focus groups, listening, design thinking, so that you can design with that heart sense in mind.
Love it, at the heart. I love that so much. So thank you. So I think you all set the stage beautifully, and it seems like our attendees agree. So one of the ways to elevate the employee experience is through employee journey mapping. So a question that came in by many of you is, what exactly is employee journey mapping and why should we do that? So I'll pass that back to you, Ryan. What are your thoughts on that? Why should we do employee journey mapping?
Yeah, and you might hear my little old dog is in here just eating her lunch, so you might hear that in the background. But besides the dog, when we think about journey mapping, there's the journey map, and then there's mapping. So let me start with the journey map. The journey map is a thing. It's a design tool that we use to better understand the experiences that employees go through. And when I say employees, in this case, we're doing employee experience mapping or journey mapping. We do the same thing with customers. But when we think about employees, this journey map serves as really a design tool, a document that we can look at and reference to say, as we're making decisions, as we're designing experiences, we can always relate back and say, well, how would that make someone feel? What does that mean to our employees? And so that's the journey map. Journey mapping, though, is something completely different. Journey mapping is the process of building relationships, understanding and learning from our employees. So it's an opportunity that we get to actually build those meaningful relationships and build compassionate solutions. And so journey mapping, the action, the process, the experience, that's actually the real benefit of doing this work. The journey map is an output. It's the hammer that we use to build the house. And so as you journey map and as you're working, think about it less about the thing that you build at the end, the journey map itself, and more about the process that we go through of, again, building relationships and building empathy with our workforce.
I love how you differentiated the two. Both very important steps. That great analogy there. So Sejal, do you want to add to that of what you and how you use employee journey mapping, what you think it is? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So I think Michelle also pointed to the employee life cycle. So the journey mapping is key in every component of that life cycle. So the first step is really good program design, understanding what are the friction points, what's working on whatever problem you're solving, what are the aspects that are not working for the target audience. So one example is benefits and how, I approach benefits in a company. Typically, it's a very kind of third-party broker-oriented process. Where I start first is really looking at the engagement survey data, talking to our employees and focus groups, and then even the recruiting team. And what are they hearing from candidates? All the way down into employee resource groups and affinity groups. How are the benefits applicable to, gender or race, and how does all that come together into making sure that you allow for rich benefit design and benefits that really matter to the employees. So, just a really quick example, but that whole learning can't be driven by third parties. It's something that the company and the leaders have to listen and build that benefit design internally and then out.
Those are great. And I see a couple good questions coming in. Just so you know, we're leaving time at the end for questions, but as I see those pop up, I'll also, we can incorporate that into our answers. Absolutely. Okay. Those are great examples of what is it? But a couple questions came in. I even see in the comments as people want to get to the nitty gritty, double click in. So I'd like to better understand how we use the employee journey mapping process to ensure success. And do we have a success story? So how do we apply this? Michelle, I've been to MGM. I know they do a great job of customer experience. Do you want to share an example of a success story?
So, our implementation, we called our platform Leo because MGM Resorts, our mascot, our logo is a lion. So we called our platform Leo. We implemented Leo as part of a whole culture and brand transformation. So working hand in hand with our marketing team, as a head of HR, our chief marketing officer was in the process of launching a brand new campaign that tied together all of the MGM Resorts properties. So if you've been to Las Vegas, we were Mandalay Bay through to Bellagio and then MGM Grand on the other side of the street, as well as properties in Michigan, Maryland, and Massachusetts. Apparently only states that start with an M. So we had all of those properties, and we really wanted to tie our employees together with a common culture, even though they were in properties as different, if you've been to Las Vegas, as different as Excalibur and Bellagio. And so, we implemented Leo as our communication tool as part of this culture transformation, which started with the brand launch, we had a new campaign called Welcome to the Show. Welcome to the Show. If you saw the sizzle reel, it was like super exciting, made you want to book a trip to Las Vegas. Internally, we kind of knew our employees weren't prepared to deliver on that experience. I would characterize it as we were selling fun, excitement, and joy. And what our experience was at the time was like going to the DMV. Lines were long, employees weren't as informed about other properties. We needed to train on new guest service standards, and Leo supported our ability to do that. When we looked at this new campaign and being able to ensure our employees could deliver on the brand promise of the campaign, we looked at beginning to end. So from recruitment throughout your entire journey, what does it look like? And I'll give you one example, is we were selling again, fun, excitement, high energy. And when we looked at our new hire orientation experience, it was, and I'm being very literal, 8 hours of signing documents that told you how you were going to get fired. Policies, procedures, sign up for benefits. And so what we decided to do to make the journey align with our brand and how we wanted our employees to feel about the company, that's an example of looking at that milestone moment of your first day, and at the time it was in person, your first day in person on the job. We changed from signing documents and we put that into a system where you could sign the documents before you got there. When you're together with your new hire colleagues who are from all of our properties, we wanted you to experience the excitement and the energy of our properties and get to know them. So we changed from signing up forms and we moved to a really exciting full day that included, for example, a board game that people would play together that helped them to learn all of the amenities in each of our properties. So you got a customer and you moved along the board with a team of people who would be in multiple different roles. So a vice president could be sitting next to a housekeeper. You would move along the board and have to build experiences for whomever your customer was, whether they were newlyweds or business travelers or bridal party. You had to build their experience. And what that did was, in a really fun way, get employees who might be working at Excalibur to understand what the benefits of and the amenities were of visiting Bellagio. So that was an example of being able to map out our employee journey, identifying where we really needed to make improvements, and then thinking about what those improvements were. How we reinforced it once we implemented was through Leo. So through our Firstup platform, we told stories to all of our employees that reinforce the brand. And I think I'll give an example of one of those stories later, but we had some viral stories that were shared across all of our properties. And before we implemented Leo, you only got news from your own property. So you heard all about Excalibur, but you didn't know what was going on down the street at Bellagio.
Those are great examples there. Does anyone else, I know I put in the chat, anyone had a bad onboarding experience? I think everybody could raise their hand and share something similar. A lot of forms, maybe a boss didn't show up, laptop doesn't work. So that sounds like a great experience for your employees. Anyone else want to add on that one for success stories?
Yeah, and I'll just share. So when we think about, why do we do journey mapping and how do we do journey mapping? At the end of the day, we're creating processes. Organizations create processes, but that provides data. When we think about journeys, that's how employees experience processes and they produce emotions, sentiments, feelings. And so the journey mapping process is important because ultimately what we're doing is process design, process and service design, really at its core. The journey mapping aspect ensures that it's human-centric. Very similar, like what Michelle has been talking about, what Sejal was talking about too, when we think about experience at the atomic level. The journey mapping process ensures that we're designing a process for humans versus a business process that we hope people use, like, and react to. So it's experience really by design versus experience by default. And onboarding is a great example because within onboarding, there's all these different processes. There's access and provisioning. Well, that's an IT process. I don't want an employee to go through an IT process. I want them to go through an experience. And so the journey map allows us to see this a little bit more holistically versus north to south. The journey map lets us see things from east to west.
Yeah, I think that's we have lots of processes, but how do you create experience? And I see Michelle, people are loving your board game. I like it as well. Might steal it for Firstup. To your point, you wrote, people ask about remote gamifying it. At one of my previous companies, we actually had people go up an elevator and play different games to learn about, to Ryan's point, all our different IT systems, which honestly is not an interesting thing to present, but if you can gamify it, make it a little interesting, win a prize, go up to the top of the elevator, it helped. So yeah, absolutely great examples. So people are loving the onboarding examples and just the applicable use cases. So one question that came in is, what is your best use case? And I will give you all a chance to think about this, but I selfishly want to share one at Firstup. About 2 years ago, we got stakeholders in the room, HR, IT, hiring managers, whoever was involved in that new employee experience. And we did just what Ryan was talking about. We mapped out all the touch points. Is there paperwork, I-9s, an employee handbook to fill out, an IT training? Should we have an onboarding buddy program? Should we send a gift? So everything from communications that go in our platform and a whole wide range of what the pre-hire to first 90 days looks like. And I was very excited because it was a process, but once we mapped it out, we saw the gaps. We saw where we might need to add an educational session or a check-in or give hiring manager templates. And so since that exercise, we have dramatically improved our onboarding experience. It kicks off before they start with communications that are sent to them at the pre-hire journey. It helps keep them warm. They get a welcome as soon as they sign their contract. I don't even have to send it. It just automatically sends. They get their first 2 weeks. And then we go into their onboarding. We have pulse surveys that check in. We have an employee gift that reinforce values. We have workshops and onboarding program. And after doing that, we have always received over 90% on our onboarding surveys at 30 and 60 day. And I love the qualitative data. And just one that came in to our onboarding specialist was, this is the best onboarding experience I've ever had. So it goes to show that when you take the time to holistically look at it and then make improvements. And also a key point was training managers and giving them resources. It really made a difference in our onboarding experience here at Firstup. So that's my favorite best use case so far. Anyone else have one they want to share?
I can share how we use storytelling through the platform just to reinforce our training. So along with this whole initiative that I talked about, we launched new guest service standards, which are behaviors that we would expect all of our employees to demonstrate to guests. And it aligned with welcome to the show. The behaviors were show, smile and greet, hear their story, own the experience, and wow. And we really emphasize the wow through storytelling. So what does that look like day to day to our employee population? And, you know, I mentioned viral stories. Through Leo, we would share, and not we meaning HR, employees would share their stories and put in their own content, their own pictures, their story, and then other people could see the story and like them. And so one of the stories that went viral was viral within MGM Resorts. Was a front desk manager at Bellagio. And this became a very famous story when we were talking about how to deliver the wow. A front desk manager at Bellagio saw a reservation that was made. And when you make a reservation, you can put in special requests or notes. And the guest, for whatever reason, it's Las Vegas, we don't know. The guest asked for a yellow rubber duck to be put into their room. And, you know, there are probably hotels like Bellagio have over 5,000 rooms. It could have been something easily overlooked, but this front desk manager decided to take this as a moment to wow, purchased a $2 rubber duck from the gift shop, could have just put the rubber duck in the room. But what he decided to do was take the rubber duck through the property, and he took a picture of the rubber duck in the spa. He took a picture of the rubber duck sitting by the pool. He took a picture of the duck by the casino and through multiple areas in Bellagio, and then put just printed the pictures out, put the pictures on the customer's bed for when they checked in, and put the rubber duck there. So it looked like the rubber duck had been on his own little vacation and journey before he came to the room. Okay. The customer was blown away, wrote this really long letter and talked about how this set up their experience that they had at Bellagio and how memorable it was. And so we told that story because it really emphasized the way that we talked about a wow was a small action that has a huge impact, and other people seeing stories like that. So then people started to put their own stories up. We didn't have to do all the content, which was a relief to the internal comms team. People started to put their own stories up. And then as people started to get recognized for creating these wow moments for our guests, more and more people wanted to do it. And that's really what led to our culture and guest service transformation related to that campaign.
And at the end of the day, just hearing that story, and the panelists got the inside scoop on this story, I think earlier in the week, and we were all kind of blown away by it. And the question becomes, and I'd love to hear from folks in the chat, do you think this employee felt loved by MGM? My take is for sure, right? Like to go above and beyond, to bring your own full self, your own personality to work. There has to be a lot of psychological safety. You have to feel trusted and valued. So imagine if that employee had had a bad experience leading up to reading that reservation. Might not have even bought a duck. So that's, I think, to Michelle's point, where in the consumer world, we call them moments of truth. It's when an organization can make an impact on an individual that builds brand loyalty. And as employers, we have that opportunity to do that every day. So I think, Michelle, it's a testament to employee experience is contagious, not just for the business, but to our customers. And so I love that story.
Yeah, it's a great
just
story.
Like to add, Michelle, I love the story. And, as HR leaders, just the whole concept of HR, it's like human resource. And the concept of journeys and employee mapping, it actually takes us from kind of resource management to heart management. And I think that is what's missing in some of the ways HR is applied or done in companies. And that touching the employee heart can then also, it's like Ryan said, it's contagious. And then it can also spread to the customers and how our employees are going to be making that experience for the customer.
Absolutely. That's a lot around when the employee has a great experience, so does the customer. So love those stories. And there was a couple questions that came in from our conversation we had on that question. So I want to do a couple follow-up. I saw one that said, is there a way to automate features that come with creating journeys? So that was one of the questions that came in. So I'm just going to address that now since we're on that topic. That's a great question, because while we're talking about personalizing the experience for each employee and really understanding what a deskless worker would go through versus a nurse versus a holiday worker or Brittany Barhite sitting at her desk as a remote hybrid worker. We need to identify those personas. And then, though, how do you do it automatic, right? You're all busy. If you work at a company like I used to with 19,000 people, you don't know everyone that starts. You don't know their birthdays, their celebrations. And so with Firstup, one of the things I did, as I mentioned, onboarding, that's, I think, why this question came in right after I did it. I did what I call set it and forget it. When we met with those key stakeholders in a room, when we mapped out that holistic viewpoint and looked at all the different things, we added an employee gift with values in our CEO's favorite book. We made sure that the compliance training got completed, but we also charted the communication cadences. What needs to be said? Is there a welcome video? Are there reminders? Are there resources? Are there first step lingo? So all that was mapped out along with things that are outside the platform. The stuff I could automate, I did. I like to call it set it and forget it. We're connected to our HRS system. It pulls it over. It knows when Ryan starts. It sends the first welcome video and then takes him on a journey. Do I audit the communications? Of course, things change. We audit them with our HR and IT stakeholders. But we also send them on this journey, and it's already personalizing it because it knows perhaps Ryan spends time in Salesforce or on his mobile app, so that's where he gets his information, where Brittany's on her browser, and she'll see the communications there. And so that's a way to personalize and set it, forget it for that question. And one other question about surveys, because that came from the best use case of deskless. I really encourage people, and Ryan, I don't know if you want to add on this, it's all about the digitalization. And we are talking about taking people to a more consumer-like experience, right? When you order Amazon, you get the whole update all day long. When you order a pizza, I could order at the beginning of this webinar, get a text at the driver's seat, and it could be on my porch by the time this webinar is over. We need the same experience for our employees, consumer-like experience. And so for those deskless, how do you reach them? Do they have mobile apps? Do they have huddles? Do they have digital signage? You have to look at what they like to receive and make it more modern. Ryan, I know you talk a lot about this. I don't know if you want to add on the desk list and how to reach them.
Yeah, I do. So when we think about digital experience just broadly, sometimes it's easy to conflate digital with electronic, and that's not what we're saying. So when we say we're trying to create a digital experience, it's human plus technology. Digital should provide new and unique experiences, add value, provide meaning to the experience. An example would be, I remember, and again, I'm a recovering HR practitioner, but I remember back in the day, the employee handbook process. Like we'd give the employee handbook to somebody, and then someone would need to read it, and then they like signed something and they gave it back and they kept a copy. Well, what we did was we thought we would make it digital. So we uploaded the employee handbook into a PDF, and then we created a form that they could submit. Well, that's not really a digital experience. That's just an electronic experience. It doesn't add new value. The employee was still reading something. Instead of reading a piece of paper, they were reading a screen. So when we talk about, especially like with Firstup, are there ways that we can deliver that sort of content in new and unique ways? Are there ways that we can add more value? So I do think when we talk digital experience, we're not saying take something that was pen and paper and then load it into a computer. That's really electronic transition. When we hear, and this sounds very consultant-y, but when we do digital transformation, it's saying what was the outcome we really were driving for, and how can we use humans and technology to deliver it in a new and exciting way? And feel free, throw it in the chat too. Sometimes I get like, I don't really have a soapbox, but I feel like I stand on one and I start preaching, but.
Oh, that's a great point. It's a great point, which is why we keep talking about how the consumer world is so great. So how can we elevate the employee experience world to do that level, not just throw a PDF into electronic means? So, okay, I saw this question came in ahead of time and just in the chat for our panelists. How do you measure success? We've talked about mapping out this employee journey map, getting stakeholders in a room, creating your personas, charting this whole look at communications, what should be done. But how do we know if it's working? How do you measure success? Michelle, do you have any ideas on that?
This might be controversial because, and it's because I reported to our chief operating officer. We had almost the exact opposite approach to, problem solving and influence. And so he would be my devil's advocate and challenge me on everything. He was not a believer in using engagement as a measure, and which is what most HR people do, is look at either retention or engagement. And it was difficult for us to directly tie in some of our HR initiatives to employee engagement, because to be candid, we had a once a year employee engagement survey, and we thought about when that survey was going to take place. If we were having massive change, we're like, well, why don't we delay it a couple of months, because, we wanted our engagement scores to be high. So it was really difficult to tie together. Our measure for success was really our guest experience. So we looked at our guest satisfaction scores, because those were given to us daily. So guests at our properties at MGM Grand or Mandalay Bay or MGM Grand Detroit would tell us, did our employees understand our amenities? Could they answer questions? Were they helpful when you checked in? Were they engaged when they interacted with you? So we used our guest satisfaction scores, because that's kind of the outcome of the result of having really engaged employees, was how our guests felt about their experience. We tended to lean on those results more, and there was an significant increase across all of our properties. Once we completed this whole initiative, which included training our employees, reinforcing the stories, recognizing them, once we completed that, we did notice a significant increase in our guest satisfaction scores. The one thing I will say that that Firstup enabled us to do as far as the employee experience goes was we had multiple things that you had to log into. So we had a recognition platform that you logged into. You logged into Workday if you wanted to find information. We had an employee portal that housed all of our policies, procedures, frequently asked questions. There's a benefit portal. And one thing that Leo as a platform enabled us to do was have a one-stop shop for our employees. Even though we maintained all of those different vendors and all of those different systems, if they wanted anything from interaction to reading news to reading about property amenities or changes or accessing policies and procedures, they went to One Stop and the links sent them to wherever they needed to go. So they only had one thing to remember versus, 10 things, the LMS login and where that was. So everything was linked to our Leo, our Firstup platform.
That's great. I love those measurable results. Ryan, you have an idea?
Yeah, I threw something in the chat too, and I have onboarding as an example because I do think I saw some really good comments in there. Like there's onboarding, offboarding is a really important experience that we oftentimes don't think about because it's like, oh, we're breaking up. Like, why am I going to invest in anything more? Not the best way to look at it. But offboarding is important. But I have onboarding in there. And as we design these experiences, and just from doing this many, many times in the past, sometimes we wait till the very end and then say, okay, how would we measure this? Instead of saying, what are the valued outcomes? And Michelle talked about this, I think, really well. What is the purpose of this journey anyways? Because if you start with, what is the purpose of this journey? And when I say purpose, the sentimental purpose, like what do we want people to feel? The interaction, who do we want people to interact or work with? The outcomes, what do we want them to be able to accomplish? And you think about it through the lens of customers. Well, the new hire is a customer in this journey. The hiring manager is a customer in this journey. The business, the organization is a customer in this journey. And so we say, well, what would good look like to them? What would success mean to them? What outcomes would we see? And if you start with that, then you can actually design intentionally to deliver those outcomes. And by virtue of that process, you ultimately have identified like the things you'd want to measure. And again, I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls I've seen just by doing experience design over the last decade-ish. We design a process. We then say, based on the process in a piece of technology, what do we want people to try to feel? And then we do change management to convince them to do it. And then we say, like, how would we measure this? And so we kind of do it backwards. We should be starting with, what do people want? How do we want them to feel? And what are the outcomes? How do we leverage technology to deliver it? And again, by virtue of that process, we say, well, we already know what we want to measure. Now, you might not have access to all that data right away, but at least it gives you an understanding of like, what are the things we should be looking for?
Great.
Quiet chat, though. I was really hoping people would throw some answers in there. You can probably already tell I'm a little obnoxious in the chat, but.
I like the chat. They're thinking. So we'll let them think while they're thinking about how to measure it. And one of the questions that came in, and I saw it in the chat as well, people want to know like the tactical, where do I actually start? And so I do want to share, after this call, we'll be sharing with you a 5-step guide in employee journey mapping. But the 5 steps, like where should you actually start if you're walking away today? I think Ryan just gave you the high level, right? What's your goal? You got to start with that in mind. What's your end goal? What's your goals? And then pick a journey. There's a lot of journeys: onboarding, offboarding, promotions, celebrations, like birthdays, anniversaries. Pick a journey, one that either is cyclical and makes a huge impact, or maybe is a gap for your company. And then step number 1, get those stakeholders in a room. Who should be involved in that journey? Who has something to say? Who has communications? Who has processes that need to be shared? Step number 2, and as I mentioned, this will be in this guide, so you don't have to memorize it all. Step number 2 is identify those personas. How many different personas? Marketers do this every day for customers. They look at their likes, their dislikes, their demographics, their frequently asked questions, their channels. You need to do that for your employee personas. Map those out because they each go on their own individual journey. Step number 3 is that holistic approach that Michelle and Ryan talked about at the beginning, where you get the sticky notes out, you put them on a board, you map everything that happens from that whole journey. Let's say it's the promotion. And so what happens from the day they get their promotion to the first 6 months. And then step number 4 is where I saw some comments on how do we automate this. Ryan said, how do we leverage technology? You start charting communications and how you're going to get that information to them based on those personas. And then 5 is measure. So that's my 5 steps. That's always in my head of where do I start? But I think you start with the end in mind, which is what gap are you trying to solve? What's that goal that Ryan mentioned? So that's my soapbox of those 5 steps that will be coming to you all. But Michelle, do you want to add a little bit on someone saying, where should I start today, since you've done this many times? Where should they start after this call today?
I agree with the 5 steps in your approach, and just thinking about, I do think you need to understand what do you want to be? What feeling do you want to have from your employees? How do you want them to experience the organization? And I think you need to map out current state and then desired future state, because everyone on this call has an employee journey. They may not have mapped it, but there's an employee journey. And I think mapping out current state and being willing to have stakeholders in the room who are going to be candid about what the current journey looks like and where there's opportunities to improve. So, when we mapped out our journey, and the example that I gave was onboarding, was being willing to say ours was not good. There were people in the organization who designed it, who were responsible for delivering it. But, we had to be candid with ourselves that it wasn't creating the experience that we wanted for our employees. And then going into, if we could, what would this look like to deliver on our brand promise and how we wanted our employees to feel? And, that happens at everything from the first touch with recruitment through onboarding, performance management, communication, storytelling, like everything that touches the employees has to be part of that map. So whether you're starting in a 30-year-old company, mapping out current state and what we want our desired state to be, or you're just starting out with a startup and saying, we have a blank slate, what do we want this journey to be? It is a step-by-step process, including multiple stakeholders or feedback and people who are willing to be really candid about the current experience.
And Brittany, do you have anything to add on that? Yes, please.
So, I think sometimes these like 4 steps or 5 steps seem linear. And I think the biggest piece is that it's virtuous, right? So you need to continually keep the listening process, the designing process. Mm-hmm. And so each of us as HR leaders, if we think of ourselves as product or program designers, that really helps the mind shift that needs to happen. Because what you're doing is listening, rolling out a program, measuring the results, and then honestly piloting and redoing. So that virtuous cycle is something that, we have to shift the mind. It's not one and done, but it's a cycle.
I love that. Yes, it's continuous listening and measuring. That is a great point there. And Ryan, I saw you were going to answer that really good personas question live, so I'll pop it over to you to answer that.
Yes, I had 2 that I might try to answer live. There's the persona one, and then I was just going to type like, how can we onboard colleagues in a holding company where the company that's been acquired still has a very unique identity, culture, brand, and we don't want to disrupt that because that was part of the.
That's great.
So with personas can be really difficult because at times we want to try to drill down and individualize the experience, and so where we start with high-level populations or segments through the work that we do, we find it really attractive to start to dig in and almost create like baseball cards where there's one persona for one person. That doesn't allow us to create scalable solutions, though in an ideal world, we can actually leverage technology to create individualized solutions. What we do is we start by looking at, and I'll just say, if I was to jump into any of your organizations, we look at your people data. And we start thinking a little bit about how might I segment these populations so I can start to have conversations. Not what are the personas, because the personas actually will reveal themselves through our conversations. So onboarding as an example, we would segment the population and you say, I bet I have some new to the workforce employees. So I want to make sure I'm talking to folks that are just coming right out of school. I have some 2nd and 3rd shift employees. I'd really like to talk to them. So we kind of have this idea in our head of these segments through journey mapping process. We then look at all of these different journeys that people have, and we try to group them together. So ultimately what I'm getting at is it can be really enticing to try to create personas before talking to our employees because it feels easy to just say, I have a new to the workforce. I have a veteran employee. I have, I'm just here for the benefits employee, whatever it might be. Start doing the research and look at the research to say, how might I group these employee segments? So you segment, that helps you have conversations. The conversations should reveal insights into how you might want to group these. But you asked, I think maybe more pointedly, like how many? I'll give you a number and I'll give you a rationale behind the number. For onboarding, probably in between 3 to 5 customers. When I say customers, those who are being onboarded, those that are supporting the journey, maybe a couple different manager or hiring manager types. And then I like to build personas for those that are also helping to facilitate the experience. So those in HR. I know those are arbitrary numbers, but what I have found is when you focus on that scale, it allows you to design rather meaningful experiences, but not biting off more than you can chew. Every organization looks different. Some organizations might say, gosh, well, we have 6 new hire personas that we really need to address. The question I always say is, do you feel like you have the capabilities and capacity to design for all 6 right now? So hopefully that gives you an understanding. But if you're saying, gosh, we have like 25 new hire personas, I would challenge you to look and say, is there a way to consolidate them a little bit? Is there a way to say, how are they more similar than different? But I'll just, well, I was going to pause, but you guys can't come off mute. Feel free to throw in the chat if that makes sense to the group. And then really quickly, well, you know what, Michelle, Sejal, do you want to add some color commentary to the personas before I just jump right over to the holding company question?
I think that that process, especially if you have a really diverse workforce. So, we had to be able to communicate to employees multiple English as a second language, varying levels of technical skill, and everyone from a on-call, varying work schedule porter who might vacuum a casino floor to senior vice presidents and C-suite and everybody in between. And so, that process was important to us. One, in deciding to make the investment, we needed to know that there would be engagement if we were going to invest, that all of our employees would be able to access and be able to use the technology. And I saw someone ask this question earlier about hourly employees. That was always kind of a barrier to us because as one of the arguments against a tool like a platform was that our employees weren't technically capable. And what we found was that everybody has a smartphone and knows how to use it. And so, this was a better way for us to engage with them and to communicate with them. What we had previously was in the back of the house would be kiosks that were or desktops that had a mouse, and our employees didn't know how to use a mouse, but they did know how to use their smartphone. So, going through and identifying each of the populations that we would need to engage, one, to justify the investment, but then two, when we were implementing and driving engagement, how do we get people to engage with it was really important for us to develop that strategy.
Yeah, I mean, to echo Michelle's input, as a leader of frontline employees, I always had a mobile first mindset. So any tools, any, rollout would always have mobile first. In addition, if there is like a strong branch or local presence, how do you make sure that, you're kind of saying it again? So mobile first would be the first step, and then reinforcing messaging at the physical site. And then finally, making sure managers are trained, because managers are also critical in that line of communication. So, when I did marketing, we did a lot of personas, and then also you say it again, and then say it again a few more times, just so you can make sure that the message gets down.
Yeah, what's the comms rule? Say it 7 times in 7 different ways. And nowadays, I'm not sure that even works with all the noise out there. But yes, you can never say it enough. I like it. Yes, great points. So we've come to the portion, we've answered a lot of the pre-submitted questions, we hope, and there is a great many questions in the inbox. I'm going to start with one that I saw multiple times is, how do we get stakeholders and the C-suite invested in this? What is your suggestion? Anyone from the panel group want to take that one?
I can start. Okay. So, when I went from management consulting and marketing into HR, my first observation was like, oh my gosh, everybody has an opinion. I think we've all felt it. So I feel like HR and marketing are probably the two worlds where no matter what, everyone feels they could do it probably differently and better. And, I really thought about that. And initially it was like a little bit irksome, but then I realized, you know what? It is everybody's, like the employee experience and how people are experiencing it while we may be, in charge of it. It is really the frontline employee, the middle manager, the executive team. And so I really shifted my mindset from feeling like, okay, we own HR to everybody owns HR. And that mindset shift really helped me because it became a lot about, hey, we're going to co-create this. So if this is the problem statement that we're trying to solve, whether it's performance management or it's an onboarding program, we're all going to co-create and co-design this. And so that's where the listening to every level of the organization starts. And then, taking especially the stakeholders and even managers through that journey from, hey, this is the problem statement we're trying to solve. This is what we're hearing. This is what the best practices from the industry are. And now, we've whittled it down into the 3 or 4 options that make sense from what the listening and journey mapping has shown us. And that way, I think everybody feels like a sense of ownership right from the get-go. And you really roll it out like a product. Hey, we're going to start a pilot. We're going to, test and listen and see what it is. And then we'll roll out a 1.0 version and a 2.0 version. So, I feel like those battle scars of like the initial, gosh, HR, I describe it as like, you're trying to make a meal that's going to appeal to 14, 20,000, 50,000 employees, right? And there's, imagine getting your own family or family of 5 happy with one meal, right? Everybody wants different things. So I think that's where that empathy and listening and bringing the whole company together on the journey was really helpful.
I love that. Yeah, a family of 5 is hard for meals. So that's a great point. I don't know if anyone wants to add on that one. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I would add, I was just looking at the attendee list, and there's a huge diversity of organizations like consumer products and financial services and hospitality and higher education. To convince senior leaders, I would start with, what are your overall business objectives? What are you trying to achieve as an organization? For us at MGM Resorts, with this whole initiative, we got our senior leaders involved with, we need our stock price to get to $40 a share. That's how we invested all of our C-suite leaders. That was our goal, was through, increasing guest service, through getting ideas for efficiency and doing things faster, better, cheaper. We had an overall goal of getting our share price to $40. The way the employees played into that was, we needed our guests to spend more money. When they came to Bellagio and checked in, we didn't want them going to Wynn to go to dinner. We wanted them to go to dinner at Bellagio, to have drinks at Bellagio, to gamble at Bellagio. And we said the way that we need to do that is to drive employee engagement, to make them more knowledgeable, to train them on guest service standards, to recognize when they do good work so more people want to do it. But we started not with, we're going to drive engagement and retention, which were HR metrics. We said, if we want stock price to get to $40, guests need to spend more money and more time on our properties. They're only going to spend more time and more money on our properties if our employees are engaging them and encouraging them to stay on our property versus going across the street to our competitor. So I'd encourage you to start with, what's your overall organization or business objective, and how does employee engagement tie into that?
Those are great answers there. Couple more minutes left and a lot more in. There was one that was a really good question, and there is a wide variety of titles on this, so I'd like everyone's take. I have an opinion. Who actually owns the employee journey mapping process? So we talked about all the stakeholders in the room, but who owns it? Does anyone have a point of view on that?
I'll quickly just share. It kind of goes back to Sejal's point too, of this whole product notion and product management. I think it's everybody's responsibility because we all play a role in the employee experience. But what happens is, if we say we all have a stake in the game, no one actually is responsible or accountable for doing the work, and it becomes very extracurricular. And so it just never really takes off. In my experience, when we think about journey mapping, creating a product management model where joining a company is a product, growing at a company is a product. This is a very similar thing that Apple does with iPhones or my MacBook. They are different yet similar, but there's a product owner that ensures that people, like, I'm getting feedback from customers going and using a MacBook. So if you really want to make this journey mapping process, and really when we say journey mapping, it's design thinking. If we really want to infuse design thinking into the organization, you have to carve it out as a true capability of the business. I don't really care if it sits in marketing, HR, IT. It probably ought to be more cross-functional than that anyways. The first step is carving it out as a true function with capabilities so that it's not side of the desk and extracurricular for, I bet many of you on the call are trying to do this stuff like at 6 o'clock at night because it's not part of your normal day job. But I got a little passionate there. Sejal and Michelle, I'll turn it back to you too.
Do you all have thoughts on who owns the employee journey mapping process? I like your passion, Ryan. I will say at Firstup, we're lucky enough to have an employee experience team that is made up of communicators and HR individuals, and then we meet with the other stakeholders. I saw some other employee experience leaders on this webinar, but I will say in my previous lives, there has not really been a true employee experience role. Although I just was interviewed with HR Brew, and he says it's a big new hot thing, so that's exciting. So maybe someday there'll be a whole department and team owning it. But until then, I think it really matters on your company and your culture, because IT, HR, comms, a lot of the functions all influence the employee experience. And so you have to work together to decide, to Ryan's point, it can't just be someone's job at 6 p.m. We have to make it a bigger thing. When digital transformation was a thing, it still is, but I feel like we've gotten past that initial hurdle of calling it a thing. We formed a committee where we made it somebody's goal at a higher level, and we all came together once a month to do digital transformation. If you don't have an employee experience person at your company, I highly recommend that you get this in front of the CIO, CHRO, CCO, and you say, I'm forming an employee experience, we call them tiger teams here for fun, council, and we're getting together to talk about this, and this is going to be one of my goals, and this is something you can report up to the board because you're going to see business outcomes. I think it needs to be just as important as those digital transformation committees that started, I don't know, 2016 and took off after COVID. Any other thoughts on that?
And ours, like, oh, go ahead, Sejal, sorry.
Just a quick, so in addition to HR and employee experience, I think the CEO has got to be the key partner. Yes. So in any company, ultimately, HR can execute, but it is the CEO as well as the executive team that has to own that experience for their functions, the company. We, I always call it, we can lay the best train tracks, but somebody's has to ride over it. So I would just add CEO and the executive team, and also not making it too siloed where suddenly HR is just owning that full experience, because we cannot.
I would agree first that senior leadership owning and really driving engagement is critical to an initiative like this. Ours evolved from, we had internal marketing and communication initially started, but then we evolved into, with a large organization, each business unit had someone that was responsible for employee experience and communication. And they collaborated with the corporate group to really drive like the implementation and engagement of executing on that journey. So it started with an employee group, but employee experience group, but whoever was in that group had to have really strong collaboration skills, because everyone had a story that they wanted to tell employees, whether it was food and beverage or hotel or marketing. And everyone believes that, what they have to communicate is the most important thing. And so whoever is in that role has to have really strong collaboration skills to make all of those stakeholders feel like they're valued.
Absolutely. Well, we are almost at the top of the hour, and I have a couple, because we didn't get to every question, so a few housekeeping items. But first, Ryan, Sejal, Michelle, thank you so much for your expertise. Great conversation. I know I learned even more from it, so thank you very much. For those of you on the call, thanks for your questions and ongoing engagement. I saw a few questions about visuals. I mentioned the employee journey mapping guide and the planner, but if that's not enough, don't worry. This is just the beginning. This is a thought leadership level of many webinars we're going to do employee journey mapping. So we will get down into the meat, into their next ones, and show you some visuals. If you're interested in learning about the Firstup product, we have a survey popping up you can complete, and we'll tell you more about automating those. If you are in London next week, I will be doing an actual design thinking workshop at our Tune London on March 6th. If you can't get across the pond, we have an entire tour across the U.S. In many states. So please check out the link of our Tune Summit and join us, because there'll be employee journey mapping workshops at all those where you'll practice the visuals and learn from each other. So thank you so much. Thank you for going on this journey with us, and have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.